Do you have a nickname? A name that people call you that might reflect your personality or character? Is it an accurate description of you or simply a small glimpse of who you really are? Now, last week we celebrated Easter, where we reflected upon and we remembered the death and resurrection of Jesus. But there's a lot more to Easter than just that. Jesus came to pay the price for our sin, which is a price that we had no hope of ever paying, the penalty of death. Oh, we might still die physically, but our spirits, and that is who we really are, will live for eternity, forever. You see, there really is more. Now, even after the events of that first Easter, as reports began filtering through from people who had seen Jesus alive, that is, resurrected, the disciples couldn't quite come to terms with what's going on. They spent a lot of time trying to understand these reports and indeed all that was happening. Now, one of the disciples of Jesus, Thomas, has been given a name that really doesn't pay him a lot of justice. Poor old Thomas. Most people know him as Doubting Thomas because after the resurrection, Jesus met with some of the disciples, but Thomas was not there with them. He missed out. Now, you might be saying, that sounds like me. I always seem to miss out when something exciting happens. Well, Thomas missed out. This is recorded in John's Gospel in chapter 20. In fact, Thomas says, I won't believe it's Jesus unless I can see the nail wounds on his hand and put my finger in them and then put my hand into the wound in his side. 8 days later. Notice the time. It wasn't just later that day or early the next morning, but over a week later. And reports were still coming in, and Thomas was probably getting quite stirred up. Well, it happened that the disciples were together again in a room with the door locked 8 days later, and suddenly Jesus was there standing with them. Now that would have been quite a moment. Peace be with you, he said. And then he turned immediately to Thomas and said, look at my hands. Put your finger there. Then put your hand in the wound in my side. Don't be faithless, believe. Thomas simply said, my Lord and my God. Thomas wanted to know for sure that this was Jesus, but when he saw him, he knew immediately, and what a beautiful response. Jesus said to Thomas, you believe because you have seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me. There are times when we can identify with Thomas. We have questions and we want answers to those very questions. We want answers to those questions before we travel any further down the road of belief. When Thomas saw Jesus, he knew indeed that this was Jesus. He didn't need the physical evidence of the wounds in his side or on his hands. He believed. And so today we can still meet with Jesus. We can speak with him and he speaks with us if we will listen. Do you recognise him? Can you hear him? Trust him by faith to stand with you as he reveals more of himself as you journey with him. Blessed are those who believe without seeing. We are blessed to be a blessing. Have a wonderful week.